You wake up to the sound of fists pounding on your door. Your heartbeat races. Before you can react, the wood splinters and hands, cold, unyielding, drag you from your bed. The night air is sharp, your breath ragged. Your neighbors are there, watching, silent. Some turn away, others whisper. Then you hear it. The accusation that seals your fate. Witch. You've been accused of a crime you didn't commit. There's no way to prove your innocence. If you deny it, you die. If you confess, you still die. But if you name another witch, you just might live. Would you sell out your neighbor, your friend, your own family? This was the nightmare that gripped Salem in the late 17th century. A town drowning in hysteria, where innocent men and women were branded as agents of the devil, where guilt was assumed and innocence was impossible to prove, where the only way to survive was to confess to a lie and betray others in the process. It didn't matter who you were. A devoted mother, a respected minister, a child barely old enough to understand the word witch. No one was safe. Once your name was whispered, the hunt began. The Salem Witch Trials remain one of the darkest chapters in American history. A brutal example of injustice in history. A time when paranoia ruled, justice crumbled, and the dead did not rest easy. 20 people were executed, hundreds accused. Their spirits still linger. And tonight, their story will be told. Long before, witch hunts ravaged Europe, claiming tens of thousands, mostly women. Fueled by superstition and religious zeal, brutal inquisitions swept through Germany, Scotland, and France. The 1487 Malleus Maleficarum intensified persecution, branding witches as servants of the devil. These fears crossed the Atlantic with the Puritans, paving the way for one more chapter in a centuries-old hysteria. Let us begin. A town cursed by fear. Salem, Massachusetts, 1692. A town built on Puritan history, gripped by fear, drowning in paranoia. The air was thick with suspicion, and every shadow concealed a potential servant of the devil. In a place where the Bible was law and the devil was real, even the smallest misfortune could be blamed on unseen, malevolent forces. A failed harvest, witchcraft, a sudden illness, a curse, a cow that refused to produce milk, a neighbor consorting with Satan himself. But fear alone wasn't enough to ignite the nightmare that followed. Something far darker was brewing, something sinister hidden beneath the surface. In the dead of winter, two young girls who were cousins, Betty Paris, age 9, and Abigail Williams, age 11, began convulsing, screaming, and twisting their bodies into unnatural shapes. Doctors found no explanation, and only one possibility remained. They were under the devil's hand. Word spread like wildfire, and soon dozens of girls claimed to be afflicted. They pointed their trembling fingers at women on the fringes of society, widows, beggars, and outcasts. With every accusation, the hysteria grew, feeding on itself like a living thing. But were these children truly bewitched? Or had the town of Salem cursed itself with something far worse? An evil far more human? Comment your thoughts below. The First Accusations. A single accusation could mean death, It took nothing more than a trembling finger and a whispered name to unleash unimaginable horror. The first to be accused was Sarah Good, a pregnant homeless beggar, Sarah Osborne, a sickly widow, and Tituba, an enslaved woman from the Paris household. 3 women outcasts in a Puritan society obsessed with piety and obedience became the perfect targets for a town entrenched in scapegoating history. But the trial was not about proof. It was about fear. As the 3 women stood before the judges, the afflicted girls shrieked and writhed, claiming invisible hands clawed at their throats. Their eyes rolled back, mouths foaming, as if possessed by unseen forces. The courtroom became a theater of the damned, with every gasp, every wail, tightening the noose around the accused. This was not justice. It was a courtroom drama where the script was already written, and every witness played their part in sealing the accused's fate. Then came something no one expected. Tituba confessed. She spoke of shadowy figures, of the devil's book, and of witches flying through the night. Had she truly seen these things, or was she saying what they wanted to hear to save her own life? But here's what history doesn't often tell you. Tituba never mentioned riding a broomstick. That was a later invention. In her testimony, she spoke of witches riding on poles, transforming into animals, and summoning demons in the woods. Tales that would later fuel enduring witchcraft legends passed down through generations. These details only fed the town's paranoia, ensuring that more names would be spoken, more necks would snap beneath the gallows. The shadows of history are long, and the echoes of Salem still whisper in the dark. But sometimes the truth is more unsettling than fiction. If you dare to uncover the eerie truths buried in time, step forward, subscribe now, and follow us into the depths of horror and history, where forgotten voices call, restless spirits wait to be heard, and the past proves that reality is often darker than fiction. The Witch Hunters. Fear has a way of twisting men into monsters. In Salem, the hunters were not soldiers, not executioners, but neighbors, preachers, and trusted officials. Leading the charge was Judge John Hathorne, a man who believed the devil walked among them. He never questioned the accusers, never doubted the visions. To him, the guilty were already damned. Beside him stood Reverend Samuel Parris, who fanned the flames, preaching that Satan was building an army inside Salem. His sermons filled the town with dread, his voice shaking with conviction. But one of the most terrifying figures, Cotton Mather. A minister obsessed with witchcraft, he pushed the use of spectral evidence, allowing dreams and visions to decide a person's fate. If someone claimed to see your spirit tormenting them, you were guilty. No proof was needed. This wasn't a hunt for justice. It was a purge. And here's a chilling truth. The witch hunters were rewarded. Every conviction meant land and wealth stripped from the accused, feeding the pockets of those in power. Could the trials be about greed, or were just about faith? The trials of madness. Once accused, there was no escape. The Salem courts did not seek the truth. They sought confessions. And if none came, they had ways of proving guilt. One of the most infamous was the touch test. The afflicted girls, writhing and screaming in the courtroom, were ordered to touch the accused. If their attacks stopped, the suspect was declared a witch. Then there was the witch cake, a mixture of rye meal and the urine of the afflicted was baked into a cake and fed to a dog. If the dog reacts strangely, it means the accused had cursed the victim through dark magic. The drowning test was even crueler. Suspects were bound and thrown into water. If they survived, they were a witch. If they sank, they were innocent, but often drowned anyway. And the most bizarre, spectral evidence. If an accuser claimed to see a spirit attacking them in their dreams, that was enough to condemn someone to death. Others were witch marks. If you had a strange mole or birthmark, you were guilty. Even the Lord's Prayer was a test. If you hesitated, it meant the devil controlled you. Reverend George Burroughs was reciting the Lord's Prayer perfectly from the gallows, something witches were supposedly incapable of doing. But instead of stopping the execution, the onlookers simply called it a trick of the devil. In Salem, innocence was a curse. The only way to survive was to confess, even if it was a lie. Would you betray yourself, or would you drown in the madness? But before we uncover the horrifying punishments that awaited those who refused to confess, take a moment to support this deep dive into history. A quick like helps more people uncover these forgotten truths, and together we can bring the shadows of the past back into the light. Now, let's step into the darkest chapter of the trials. The brutal tortures used to force confessions. The torture of the accused. Confessing to witchcraft may have delayed their sentence, but those who refused to comply endured relentless pressure and extreme conditions designed to force a confession. The accused were taken from their homes and placed in overcrowded cells, where fear and uncertainty consumed them. Many were restrained as they awaited trial, enduring harsh conditions that tested their resilience. The walls bore witness to their whispered prayers and their silence. Dorothy Good, a 5-year-old girl, was one of the youngest victims. She had been accused of witchcraft simply because she was the daughter of Sarah Good, one of the first women arrested. The frightened child was locked away in a cell, alone, for months. Jailers reported that she laughed at strange moments, spoke to an unseen black man, and scratched at the walls until her fingernails tore away. When her trial came, she did not understand the questions, but under pressure, she mumbled that her mother was a witch. That was all the court needed. Sarah Good, the mother, despite her fragile state, was led to the gallows. Even in her final moments, she refused to submit, speaking words that would be remembered for centuries. "You are a liar. I am no more a witch than you are a wizard. And if you take my life, God will give you blood to drink." Months later, Judge Nicholas Noyes, the very man who sentenced her, choked to death on his own blood. Rebecca Nurse, a kind and elderly woman whose community had loved her until they turned against her. Her final words were a whispered prayer as the trapdoor beneath her feet swung open. Some were subjected to brutal restraints that silenced their voices, preventing any chance of defense. Others faced the terrifying ordeal of the ducking stool, plunged into icy waters, struggling for breath as the crowd watched in tense anticipation. These methods were designed not for justice, but for submission. Perhaps the most horrifying fate belonged to Giles Corey, an 81-year-old man who refused to enter a plea. The court ordered him pressed to death. They stripped him naked, laid him on the ground, and placed a heavy wooden board over his body. One by one, they stacked massive stones onto his chest. "Do you confess?" the magistrates demanded. Giles Corey, his face turning purple, his ribs cracking under the pressure, whispered two words: "More weight." Day after day, the executioners returned, adding more stone, more agony. Corey's tongue bulged from his mouth, his eyes bloodshot, but still he did not confess. After 3 days of unimaginable suffering, he died, but never pleaded guilty. His death was slow, excruciating, but it left his accusers shaken. But physical torment was not enough. They turned families against each other. Children were forced to testify against their own mothers. Husbands betrayed wives. Sisters condemned brothers. Fear had warped the people of Salem into something just as monstrous as the witches they claimed to hunt. The paranoia spread beyond humans. A dog was accused of being a witch's familiar and executed by gunshot after allegedly bewitching children. The mad trial ends. The terror spread like wildfire. No one was safe. At first, it was the outsiders, the weak, the forgotten, the beggars, the healers, the women who didn't fit in. But soon, the accusations reached the highest ranks of society. Even the wife of Governor William Phipps was accused. The madness had gone too far. When the colony's elite realized they were next, the paranoia turned to panic. Governor Phipps, once a supporter of the trials, couldn't ignore the chaos anymore. With his own wife under suspicion, he dissolved the court, put an end to those tragic executions, and ordered the remaining prisoners released. But justice came too late for the 20 innocent souls. What caused the Salem Witch Trials? What turns a peaceful village into a nightmare of accusations and death? In colonial America, where survival depended on order and obedience, was the Salem hysteria merely paranoia? Or was it something deeply rooted in the foundations of this new society? Some believed an unseen force crept through Salem, turning neighbor against neighbor. Others point to the strict Puritan faith, where fear of sin and punishment created an atmosphere where paranoia thrived. They believed the devil could walk among them, disguised in the bodies of their friends, their neighbors, their own family. But what if the cause was even more disturbing? Some historians believe a toxic fungus, ergot, poisoned the town's rye crops, warping the minds of those who ate it. Visions, paranoia, writhing. The symptoms mimicked possession, but instead of seeking medicine, the villagers sought revenge. Then there were those who saw an opportunity in the madness. Greed, power, and old grudges fueled accusations as neighbors turned on each other, whispering lies that led to the noose. Some of the wealthiest victims had their lands stolen the moment they were convicted. So what really caused the Salem Witch Trials? Was it hysteria or something else entirely? And if such madness could take hold once, could it happen again? The Haunting of Salem. Salem did not rest after the trials. The screams of the innocent never truly faded. They lingered, whispering through the walls, crawling beneath the floorboards, slipping into the ears of those who dared to listen. Visitors speak of cold hands gripping their shoulders in empty rooms, of shadows moving where no one stands. In the dead of night, the old gallows site is said to echo with unseen footsteps, the sound of wood creaking beneath invisible weight. At the old Salem jail, where the accused spent their final days, moans seep through the stone walls, chilling, desperate, like souls still pleading for their innocence. One woman, visiting the house where Judge John Hathorne once lived, collapsed in terror after seeing a face appear in the mirror. Not hers, but that of a woman with a rope around her neck. And in the infamous Turner Ingersoll mansion, built by a family tied to the trials, guests wake to the feeling of someone standing over them, watching, breathing. Some say the past never truly fades, and Salem's history continues to shape the way we remember it. Whether these accounts stem from lingering energy or the power of collective memory remains a mystery. The Witch's Curse. The Salem Witch Trials left a scar on history. But what if they also left something else, a warning? Many believe the souls of the accused never found peace. The places where they were hanged, the homes where they were dragged from their beds, they are cursed. Shadowy figures appear at night, whispers drift through empty rooms, and visitors feel an unseen presence pressing against their chests. Is it just imagination, or is it the rage of the innocent, forever trapped between worlds? Some say the curse of Salem is not just supernatural, it's psychological. History repeats itself. Fear spreads, lies destroy. Innocent people suffer while the guilty remain untouched. But perhaps the spirits of Salem are trying to tell us something. Look closer, question everything, before it's too late. The Salem Witch Trials were not the only dark chapter in history. Across centuries, infamous witch hunts have left a trail of fear, injustice, and forgotten souls. If you dare to uncover more haunting tales of persecution and hysteria, watch our video about witch hunts next. It provides a broader context of how superstition, fear, and power struggles fueled mass hysteria. Not just in Salem, but across Europe and beyond. The past never truly fades. It lingers in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. The legacy of Salem still echoes, a stark reminder of how fear shapes history. If you're drawn to the eerie and unexplained, subscribe now and let us explore the mysteries of the past together, where the next story awaits just beyond the veil.